Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And you didn't even blink once or twice or have chance to go into the kitchen to get the kettle going to put on a coffee, and here we are back. Okay, no messing, fast and furious, getting it in there, getting our two sessions of Q&A done before Maghrib. Bear in mind, obviously, that the central studio for Iqra TV is in Croydon, London, and their Maghrib is significantly earlier than us here up north in Bradford, and I guess even further north we go, the later it will become. So that's why you will find that the adhans, when they go, they are going obviously specifically for based on London's timing. So please bear that in mind. Actually, I think that's a point that we need to make, that don't just go by the azan when you hear it on Iqra, because that is based on the London time. So if you're not in London, then obviously you're not supposed to be praying at London time. So I think the adhan will go, it goes about approximately 10 minutes before Bradford time. So obviously I mentioned Bradford because Bradford being the center of the universe, that's the reason why I mention it. So don't just go hear the adhan and think, oh, okay, I need to go now make Maghrib. No, wait until your time, download the app. We have an app, Wifaqul Ulama has an app, and on the app it will give you the various times. So you can find Wifaqul Ulama's app both on whatever it's called, don't even know what it's called, what's this called, App Store, and also on the equivalent Play Store, is it? For an Android? I haven't got Foggy Store, it is on the Android, but I think it's Play Store. You know where to look for your apps. Anyway, we are already fast running out of time. If you do have any questions, please, now is the time to call. As you saw in the first session, we went through those calls and then we ran out of time. The number to phone is 01274 214 299. That's 01274 214 299. Whilst we wait for the phone to ring, the brother who asked the question first, but I'm sure he doesn't mind because we allowed our sisters to get their questions answered first, and now we will go to the brother's question. He gave me a choice, Salman Rushdie, and also the person walking into the masjid and collapsing. You know what? Special treat for you, my dear brother. I'm going to try to attempt to answer both for you. For those who didn't know, or those who aren't old enough, some chap called Salman Rushdie, he wrote a book called The Satanic Verses. He claimed it was a work of fiction. However, when you look into it, unfortunately, it was a disguised attempt at, a not very good attempt either. It wasn't heavily disguised. It was somewhat, disguised in a overt way in which it was ridiculing the Quran. That's where the word verses is coming in, and also ridiculing Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and others aim at in the Prophet ﷺ's family. That's what the aim was to ridicule. Obviously, when the book came out, unfortunately, the publishers, whose name will go unmentioned, didn't really think it through that, hold on, this is going to cause offense to 1.4 billion people on the planet. Maybe we should rethink this, or maybe the novelist or the writer, the author, should maybe change tack slightly. But no, people wanted to be stubborn and talk about freedom of speech, or freedom of speech when it suits people, and this book was published. And like I said, Bradford was the center of the universe. It was an Iranian cleric that issued a fatwa against the author, and it was quite a serious fatwa, which I don't need to go into at this particular moment in time. And what we saw, obviously, was also many Muslims in Bradford, in particular, who stood up against this and burnt some copies of the Satanic Verses. What happened then was the media, which is ongoing onslaught against Muslims, picked this up. And what they wanted to show was that Islam was a religion that was very much like Nazism and communism, and fascism. That fascists, Nazis, and communists, what they do is they don't like free speech. They don't like people to be free to decide what to do, what not to do, and they burn books, okay? They burn books. So they'd just taken this particular one-off thing and inflated and changed it into some kind of clash of the civilizations. And then the whole issue of integration came up, the whole issue of assimilation came up, the whole issue of immigration came up. and the whole issue of Muslims came up. And that, to be honest, since the 80s, has been on the agenda through the 90s, through the noughties, and through the 10s, I guess. Okay? And it's now carrying on into the 20s. This is something that's carried on. There's been a slight change in tact, I would say, and I mean very slight, in the last sort of couple of years, maybe last year even, where people are realizing, you saw it on the football fields, the level of racism that's out there, the level of Islamophobia now, where Muslims are being attacked. And I think even though people are starting to realize, oh, hold on a second here, maybe this might be something to do with what we're saying, maybe it might be something to do with what we're printing. Okay, now, you know, we've seen this has carried on, whether it's the Charlie Hebdo cartoons or other things where people are provocative and trying to provocate Muslims into reaction. And I've written extensively about how Muslims living in Western democracies, where this is allowed, where it's legal, what they should be doing. And that is, you know, using the law in order to make things like this illegal. We've seen, for example, you cannot say anything that would be considered as anti-Semitic. You know, even mentioning, and you know, what we sometimes forget is that we just assume anti-Semitism is just to the Jewish people. It's not, because you know the Semites, when you look at them, it's really talking about people living in that whole area. But anyway, that's for another day. So the point is that, like, you can hardly say anything that would be misconstrued. So people are so careful. There's a lot of self-censorship. I'm slowing the tongue down. There's a lot of self-censorship in that people are so afraid of saying anything that might be construed as anti-Semitic, they don't say anything. Okay, they don't see anything negative. Even when, you know, you see things like we've seen certain governments that have oppressed people, for fear of being called an anti-Semitic, people don't even call them out, don't even criticize them. So similarly, but Islam and Muslims are kind of like, you know, free targets and free, you know, it's free game. So like, you know, you can't print something against, you know, Judaism or against Jews in a cartoon and ridicule the Jewish faith or ridicule Jews or something that they would be considered as anti-Semitic. Then we should also come under that same level of protection. That is only what we consider to be equality. You can't, on the one hand, talk about freedom of speech and have equality and then discard equality when it comes to another people, another race. That's just considered as hypocritical. So that's the Salman Rushdie affair. Also, what happened around that same sort of time was Ray Honeyford was a head teacher at Drummond Middle School. In those days, we had first, middle, and secondary schools when I used to go to school. First school, you stayed up till, I think you were about, what, 6, 7 years old? And then you went to middle school at sort of around 7, 8, and then you stayed there till you were 13, and then you went to upper school, as it's called, okay, higher school or upper school, and you went in at the age of 13, and you went into third form, and then you did fourth form, and then you did fifth form, and that's when you would leave with your GCSEs. But if you stayed, you would go into sixth form. That's why nobody asked the question, why is sixth form called sixth form? You know, you have year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 11, and then after year 11, you go into sixth form. Why aren't you going into year 12? I think they do use year 12 now or year 13, but people still use sixth form. I know that many schools are now trying to change to year 12 and year 13, but you still hear they don't use sixth form. And that's where sixth form comes from, because you used to go to upper school at third form as a 13-year-old. Then you did fourth form as a 14-year-old, fifth form as a 15-year-old, going on to 16. And then when you were going into 17, it was sixth form. There was no seventh form, because sixth form was a 2-year course, whatever you decided to do. Why am I telling you about this for? The reason why I'm telling you about this for is middle school is on Drummond, which is on Drummond Road. It's no longer called Drummond now. Now it's a primary school, because now we don't have first schools, and the primary school is Iqra Primary School. But it's the same building, way back in the days. I remember it because I was at Manningham Middle School, and we used to walk, because Manningham didn't have its own swimming baths. So we had to walk to the Drummond swimming baths, and I used to hate it. As soon as I used to get that chlorine smell, I just despised swimming. I don't know, maybe I had some kind of, I was tormented, because we had this swimming teacher, and what they would do is, in those days, you had these really high windows back in the day, so that you would have this huge stick with a hook on it, and you would use the hook to open the window and the hook to close the window. So what this swimming teacher did, I'm sure they gone on some like military training or something, they would force you to grab hold of the end of this stick. And if you didn't, they'd, tap you with the stick. So eventually you gave up, when your knuckles were getting wrapped with this stick, you gave up holding onto the edge. You had this kind of edge that everybody held onto, which had this spittle where you could spit into it and that would go outside the bath. And so you're holding onto this. So what they would do is they would reach out and then they would sort of grab you and make you forcibly hold onto the stick, and they drag you into the middle of the pool. Now you had no choice. Now you can't hold on to the edges. And then they would pull the stick away. My God, the amount of times where you thought you were going to drown and die, and that's it. So I had I get triggered by smells. I was just explaining to Maulana Hayat when he was here earlier that, when I get into a minibus now, I get triggered by the smell of the leather. And I used to have, really bad travel sickness when I was a kid. So as soon as I sit in a minibus now, the minibus doesn't need to move. As soon as I get that smell of leather, I think, oh no, I don't feel too good. I feel a bit queasy. So eventually I'm going to get to the story, aren't I? Yes. So there was that school there, and there was a chap, Ray Honeyford, he was a head teacher, and he said that, Muslims or Asians should not be accommodated. Rather, they should be somewhat encouraged and somewhat forced to assimilate. Because he said multiculturalism has failed. Multiculturalism, where each culture can retain its identity and also have the identity of the nation state, he said had failed as an experiment. And what needed to happen now is multiculturalism should be thrown in the bin, and now there should be just a monoculture. A bit like the kind of republic attitude that France has, where you are not Muslim, you are not Jewish, you are not Christian, you are French, and that's it. That's your identity, like it or leave it. So that's the story with regards to Salman Rushdie. Still got a couple of minutes to mention the story that the brother mentioned with regards to the chap not going to the masjid. In a way, this was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expressing mercy towards this person. This person deep down had some good in him. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to give him a good death. We know from narrations that a person can live a bad life all his life, and he's within an arm's reach of Jahannam. Within an arm's reach of Jahannam. And then his taqdeer overtakes him and takes him to Jannah. Similarly, you can have a person who lives a good life all their life, and they're within an arm's reach of Jannah, and then their taqdeer overtakes them and they go to Jahannam. So what looks like this brother's life was very much that life where he was oblivious to the deen, didn't take it seriously, always avoided praying salah, didn't do good things, and he just preoccupied himself in that way. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had written in his destiny, his predestination, that this brother will go to Jannah. So now, as I say in our language, Pana Jorashla in Pashto, a way was made for him. Like if you're going to die in Algeria and you think, how am I ever going to end up in Algeria, And if someone was to say to you, you're going to die in Algeria, and so you say, well, how am I going to die in Algeria? I'll never go to Algeria. That's what I'll do. I'll avoid Algeria. So you get on a plane and you're going to fly to Istanbul. But for whatever reason, you get diverted to Libya. But they can't land at Libya, and then you get diverted to Algeria. You land at Algeria, you just get off the plane and you die. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make a way for you where you need to go. So this brother, obviously, he was going to die a good death. He was going to die in wudu, having walked to the masjid, walked into the house of Allah, and that's where the angel of death was going to take his soul. And you are resurrected in the manner that you die. So if you die in a good place, in a masjid, in wudu, coming to pray salah, then you'll be resurrected like that, even though your past life might have been somewhat different. Now, we can't be strategic with this and say, you know what, like we do, I'll do chill out all my life. When I get to 55, 60, I'll go perform Hajj, I'll come make tawbah, and then I'll be good after that. How do you know you're going to live till you're 60? You could die next week, the month after, whatever. So one can't plan their death, shall we say, or be strategic with Allah, or work against Allah, or try to see if they can manipulate their situation. Anyway, I am conscious of time. We could sit and talk all day. So we are now finishing the second session for today, and as it's Friday, it's the last one of this week. I will hopefully see you again next Wednesday, inshallah. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep you happy in your homes, in your families. May He give you the strength and conviction to worship Him as He should be worshipped. We send durood upon Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka hamidun majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka hamidun majid. And I bid you farewell. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.